Let's take you here now. Zimbabwe's ruling Zanu-PF is briefing the media following legislative and presidential elections in that country. Let's take you live there now.
The electoral courts, it really made ZEC work overtime. Maybe mistakes were made, definitely. There were also time delays. There were also logistical issues. And we are very happy that the precedents, the supremacy of the people exercising their vote was the guiding principle in general, and an extension was given to those polling booths where voting had not yet started because the voting material was late. It is in the same spirit that ZEC, maybe much to the chagrin of the ruling party, allowed certain members of the opposition who had 10 days to register as candidates, but only left it at the last minute to register as candidates. They had 10 days. They went there without their money, without their documentation complete. And ZEC made a decision that their registration be extended until midnight, when closure was at 4 o'clock on the 21st? The 21st, yes. On the 21st. So here is a bias towards giving every Zimbabwean an opportunity to go and vote. Yes, there was a decision by the courts, High Court, on certain candidates which was then overturned by the Constitutional Court. It was in the same spirit that the Constitutional Court felt that the vote is very important. We must give the people a chance to vote, rather than to say administrative issues hobbled the people from voting. I want to remind the foreigners who are here, the foreign correspondents, we are the first national liberation movement in modern times to fight an armed struggle to the point of victory and force an armistice on settler minority racist aggressors and really invite the hand of their imperial sponsor, England, to host an armistice called the Lancaster House Agreement in 1979. Out of that, a near victory army decided to lay the arms down, assemble in dangerous gathering points, and give the people of Zimbabwe the free rein to choose whom should be their president. By the way, there was no voters' roll in 1979. There wasn't. In the event, we assumed office by the ballot box in 1980, not by the ballot. Many other countries, I won't mention them, with national liberation movements, took it upon themselves that because they won the military victory, they are the government. We actually became a template for the United Nations. I'm a diplomat. I've served in several countries. I was in New York. We became a template of how to resolve issues after armed confrontation within a nation. So I want to emphasize that our democratic credentials, one, they were hard-earned by our sacrifice. Two, we actually exercised that democratic right to assume office. I want to dispense with the sanctimonious notions of some certain Western countries, particularly those with an imperial record which never gave Africa democracy, to try to say they can now become proselytizers of democracy. No. Colonial Britain never gave the blacks of this country, the African majority, a right to vote. It never did, from 1890 when they occupied until we won it by the armed struggle. So equally, Washington, a country which has got a history of slavery as the mainstay of its original economy, cannot come and say we are paragons of democracy, therefore you Zimbabwe, you must do things our way. And there is a sobering aspect of seeing the reality of seeing a former president in a mugshot, which is President Trump, because he was refusing to accept the outcome of an election. It just means that the road to democracy can be very difficult, even for those sanctimonists who are in Washington. It's a challenge. We accept the challenge, we try our best to make sure that we travel the road of democracy. That's why we have observers, that's why we have principles from SADC. Now, coming to the SADC principles, we want to make it very clear. They are a product of the member states of SADC. They are not administered by a particular individual who may become the head of a delegation. He is responsibility. So we hear of a certain head of the delegation from a certain country of the SADC mission, without prior consultation with his colleagues, fellow observer missions from sovereign states, and without them even having given reports back to their countries, even gone back to their secretariat, because the secretariat is the collective secretariat of SADC. He decides to delve into matters which have nothing to do with his mandate. SADC has got several committees which deal with various issues of SADC, of Southern Africa development. It even has a constitutional review committee within its ambit. If anybody has got issues about the Zimbabwe laws, that is the relevant body within SADC to come and question the statutes of the sovereign state of Zimbabwe on a peer-to-peer basis as fellow acceders to the SADC protocol of unity, of cooperation. It is not the duty of a particular individual to arrogate to himself the role of a constitutional review committee of the laws of Zimbabwe. So, Mr. Nevas Mumba from Zambia, we call you to order. Don't delve into the laws of Zimbabwe. If you've got issues with those, tell your relevant institutions, not the SADC Observer Committee, your relevant institutions, to take it up with the SADC Secretariat in Zambia. Otherwise, we know that he is a preacher. He comes here, he has got his friends, and he was seen hobnobbing and accosting himself with the CCC. We don't think that's what Zambia stands about. He even goes further to try to make an issue about civic organizations and chooses some against the other in Zimbabwe. He favors Zesin and others. Then he castigates FAS on the other hand. This is a bias. I want to remind you, America had a civil war in 1861, starting in 1861. Because of the duty to protect the unity of America, certain of its citizens decided to form the American National Rifle Association. It's a historical product of the American evolution in its as it became a modern state. Today, the NRA is one of the most active of American civic bodies, to the extent that it now decides to lobby for certain politicians with a bias towards the Republicans. Not only that, you hear of periodic massacres of school children, of people in shopping centers, because America says you've got a right to have a gun. We went through a civil war. We went through a liberation movement. One time the gun was my friend. It's the only other thing I could hold on besides my anything. But we dropped, we after independence, so we know guns in Zimbabwe. We don't have a gun culture. But the Americans have maintained a gun culture which is now causing so many massacres in their country. But nobody wants to speak about that from other countries. Now you want to make an issue about our historical circumstances. Our people are naturally vigilant because they fought a war, and they will continue to be vigilant, and they have institutions which are a continuation from that war, like FAS, of our people, like civic committees which are looking at security and intelligence to say, are we safe? I always emphasize the point. If in Zimbabwe you go into a rural area or certain places and you cannot be identified as to who you want to marry or not get married to, within 3 to 4 hours, the CIO, the intelligence organization of the country, will know. Where does that come from? It comes from the war. You hate to know who is who. Know your friend, know your enemy. If you don't, you die. That's what, because there was all sorts of institutions of terror, of murder, of disappearances, the Selous Scouts, the Special Air Services of Zimbabwe, all these institutions, the Pfumorevan, these are historical institutions. It lies difficult in rural areas, so vigilance is natural in Zimbabwe people. So to make an issue about FAS and other historical institutions about Zimbabwe is to question the origin of the state. And for Mr. Nevas Mumba, I want to remind him that our original training about Zimbabwe Defense Forces came from the Zambians. We were hosted in Zambia. We were hosted in Tanzania. Maybe because he is from a later day party, he can't go to the archives of his country and really understand the role of Zambia in the birth of what is now the Zimbabwe Defense Forces. I want to politely remind him to go and read the history of this country before he starts castigating Zimbabwean entities. It's not right. Every country has got its own history. That's why I made an allusion to America and its National Rifle Association. The Americans had actually copied it from England, which is also a National Rifle Association. So the idea of vigilance in communities is not new. And the idea is not new. It is the same as destiny.
All right, we come out of that Zanu-PF briefing, of course, due to that poor quality. Essentially, Zimbabwe's ruling party briefing the media there following the legislative and presidential elections in that country. And as counting continues and results start trickling in, the party's director was the one briefing the media there, information and publicity, Farai Marapira. And he says that whilst the party does not know who won, ultimately the people of Zimbabwe would have won. He's also said that those who are criticizing the elections should take it up with the right channels. They should take it with a SADC. More than 6 million people were registered to vote in these polls. Voting started on Wednesday and it was extended to Thursday due to a lack of voting ballots, amongst others. Obviously, there was also problems with the voting roll as well. Observers have been scathing so far in terms of their preliminary report and their insights into these elections. Essentially, the European Union has been scathing of the poll. It says the election fell short when measured against certain aspects, including regional and international standards. But we continue to monitor those results trickling in from Zimbabwe, and we will give you an update as soon as we have it.